It's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, designated driver and mouth runner. Yes, ready to deliver Doctor Who content and conversation once again on our free-speaking, big-thinking, eclectic and eccentric podcast. Type 40's a show for everyone. Whatever decade or century you started watching, reading or listening along to those ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We chat about it all on this show, and all being well, there could even be a few laughs along the way. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40. And this time, yes, we're back for more, another guest or two. To get started. It was a thrill to record, and I know you're going to love it. But first of all, before we get into all of that, I'm delighted to welcome my playmate, my long-suffering playmate. Once again, she's back, the one, the only, Sarah Graham.
Hi, Dan. Yeah, it's definitely long-suffering. It's great you'll get me into.
I know. Well, and this time we've sort of done some travelling of our own, haven't we? We've travelled time zones once again in The Old Girl and connected with two other people, connected with an exciting new project surrounding Doctor Who. But before we get to that and to them, let's jog people's memories a little. I wanted to ask you, Sarah, where were you in 1996?
Where was I in 1996? Oh, God, well... This might shock you. I was still at school.
What?
I was in my final year at junior school.
Junior school?
I moved up to secondary school September 96.
Okay.
And yeah, I was busy having my sleepovers and dancing to Take That and Boyzone and
oh, I see.
all that smash it stuff, yes. Good old Gina G.
Yeah, who are just a little bit... Well, I was going to ask you, was it Blur or Oasis? But it sounds like it could have been, was it Take That or Boyzone?
I like them all. I never really took a side. I liked Oasis and I did like Blur. So I was just a fence sitter during all that Britpop era. But yes, obviously, that was all overshadowed by Take That splitting up. That was the main thing going on in my life.
Oh, yes, that happened in early 96, didn't it? Remember the phone lines they launched for all those poor girls who were all cut up, and a few boys, no doubt, who were cut up about Take That splitting up. Yeah, I was really into... Well, George Michael was my very favourite solo actor. I think he was making a big comeback around that time. He hadn't recorded for years. He'd fallen out with his record label, and all sorts was going on. He'd brought out a new album called Older. I love that. Still love that. One of my favourite albums. But yeah, I was also a really big fan. A really big fan of Mark Morrison, Return of the Mac. That was a great track. But
I like that one. They're both good, yeah.
Where is he now? What on earth happened to Mark Morrison? But as regards popular culture, it was quite an explosive time. There was lots going on at the cinema. I think the 80s had this sort of... It cast a long shadow, really. The 90s took a little longer to get going. But when the movies came, when the music came, it really did make a huge difference, shook everything up, and gave the decade a lot of character and a lot of colour and a lot of swagger. And yet for so long, the Doctor, as a cultural figure, was absent from it all. And it was heartbreaking, Sarah.
Yeah, just that the absence on screen, because obviously it was still very much in fans' hearts, and there was still conventions going on and the meetups and thing. You know, Fandom was keeping it together with the magazine. But yeah, but for all intents and purposes, there was no Doctor Who. It was just something I'd heard of. You know, then like, you know, you get them kind of programs. It'll be all right on the night, and looking back on old TV and
Auntie's Bloomers. Do you remember that?
and just like, sorry, I'm going to get a lot of reactions to old TV. That's not what I meant. Classic TV, TV, guys.
I'll let that one pass.
And it's so that I knew. Obviously, I knew of the Doctor, I knew the TARDIS. Daleks were still very much around, though, because there was a Kit Kat advert around the same kind of time. Daleks seem to just have a life on their own. You know, everybody knows what a Dalek is in Great Britain. But yeah, obviously, I wasn't pining for it like poor Doctor Who fans were in the wilderness years.
No. It was like that. There were remnants of that 26-year run. How could there not be? That was still there. You said the Daleks did persist, and the TARDIS. There were people that recognised those things. It was still kind of there, but it was sort of dwindling, and it was impossible for the likes of me and thousands, millions of other people to let it go. But we do have to sort of move on with our lives, really. And I had the summer of my life in 1996. It was a long and hot summer, and yes, so was she. But even better was the eventual return after such a long break of Doctor Who, and the TV movie when that premiered. I don't know if it was the talk of every playground, but it was certainly the talk of every beer garden. I was into all the lad culture at the time, Sarah. And this time on the show, we get to talk to one of the people who made that happen. And on the very eve of their return to the Whoniverse, the release of this brand new film, and it's kind of about us all this time, rather than the Doctor. Matthew Jacobs was the writer of the TV movie, and he's here along with his friend and colleague Vanessa Yuille. That's coming up in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, and I know you would, just before midnight, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away on the device of your choice, if you know where to look. There's well over 100 now reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular panelists and some pretty awesome guests. We know there's something for every fan at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about all of that later on, as well as a couple of minutes where we will make contact with the matrix of all knowledge that we call the Fandom Podcast Network. We'll be connecting with Kevin to find out about all the other shows covering all the other franchises that are going on over there. Okay, now that's all sorted. We've got to check the cubby hole above the P there. Turn the lock, spice up our lives. Remember them?
Yes,
and connect now with American Anorak themselves. That's Vanessa and Matt. Enjoy the show. We'll see you. We'll speak to you all later on.
Enjoy.
The year was 1996, and fans of that much-missed old family favourite Doctor Who had kept the faith. We'd waded through rumours and false starts, movies and series pitches, and all manner of other things for the best part of 7 years. So maybe somebody broke a mirror in the TARDIS, who knows? But just when so many of us had started to think it would never happen, that police box, well, it did appear spinning out of development hell and onto our screens for one night only. Paul McGann was the Doctor, ably assisted by Daphne Ashbrook and Yi Ji So there in a desperate race, quite literally, against the clock. up against his oldest and bestest enemy too, the Master. The film did fantastically well in Great Britain on BBC One that May bank holiday. And the VHS tapes, well, even they flew off the shelves. Sadly, though, that was that. And the American network, they didn't pick up the series, and both fans and those plucky creatives who'd made it all happen against the odds in the first place were all left rather deflated. And we kind of realized in time that we'd got to move on. The Eighth Doctor's adventures, they would eventually continue in one dimension or another, or two or three. But what of the others associated with Doctor Who the movie? Now, Matthew Jacobs, he wrote the final script for the film, working closely with executive producer Philip Siegel. And it was a story that would rock and shock the fan base several times over, shaking up the Time Lord's parentage, amongst other jaw-droppers. God, I don't half miss the 90s. For Matthew, of course, as a writer, director, and actor, it was on to the next job. And as fans, we didn't know that much about him that IMDb never told us until quite recently. But now he's getting much more visible and about to premiere a brand new feature-length documentary film centering on his own very personal connection, not just to the Doctor, but to the whole Doctor Who universe, the Whoniverse that surrounds the show. And I'm delighted to welcome Matt and his colleague Vanessa Yuille to Type 40 this time to tell us all about it. Hello, both. Hello,
Hi.
Everybody.
Hello.
Hey there.
Great to see you. Great to have you here. First of all, congratulations both on the imminent release of Doctor Who Am I? There's a genuine buzz around this project. I'm noticing the screenings popping up, Sarah, at the selected cinemas, and a Blu-ray's just been added too. It's all really, really promising. But I think to start, to get the ball rolling, what I'm wondering, Matthew, is it's been 26 years since the TV movie premiere, and you've had this colourful and wide career, just as much since as before, haven't you? So why now? Is this sort of unfinished business for you?
Well, really, it's Vanessa as much as anything. Vanessa's co-director on the film and the editor. And we'd been working on a couple of other movies together that I directed, which was Your Good Friend and Bar America. And then the 50th came along around that time. And after the Night of the Doctor, I started getting invited to American conventions. And so I didn't really want to go. And then it was Vanessa's idea that, well, there might be a documentary in this. So initially I thought it was just going to be about the fans. And then we went and we made, we shot for a weekend at Gallifrey 1. And when we came back, we thought there's something deeper here. And we carried on and, and I think Vanessa, it's true, isn't it, Vanessa? You always knew that it was kind of going to be about my journey as much as anything else, and that it was going to be a much more sort of personal film. And it slowly evolved. Well, that was like 7 years ago. So it's open. So for about 2 or 3 years, we were going around conventions and in and out of fans' homes, and we basically built this
wonderful
collection of stuff that Vanessa edited brilliantly. And yeah, and eventually Syfy London kind of leapt on it. Syfy London Film Festival, they actually watched it through and they put it out on their at their festival, and we got the audience award there. And we're doing the thing that is almost mythic amongst independent filmmakers. It's a sort of a thing of the past, but we're doing it. It's happening where a distributor, sales agent has picked us up from a festival. We're a tiny film. It's just the two of us. This is American Anorak. You're looking at it, Vanessa and I, and now it's amazing. It really is amazing. The warm response, not just to the TV movie, but to our little documentary.
So it sounds like an acorn that you've both planted together, Vanessa. You're a director, an editor, and a producer, and an actress yourself, aren't you? So how did you first meet Matt?
Well, this was years ago when I was working on my thesis documentary. It's a short documentary, but I was working on my thesis, and Matt was an instructor or a professor where I was studying. So it was like way back in the day when I was still learning how to write a screenplay. And but we hit it off, and I worked with him on 2 of his other feature films as like an assistant director, co-producer, and actor in one of them. But we built our friendship over many years, and it was oh yeah, we've acted in some movies together, some other ones.
Oh wow!
With Bernard Rose, but it really stemmed from our friendship, and it was over a cup of coffee. And he said he was being invited to these Doctor Who conventions, and I was like, why? Because I knew Doctor Who from the 80s in the United States when it was on PBS. Mm-hmm. People didn't know about this show at all, but I had fond memories of watching with my dad. So my mind was blown. And then when Matthew said he wrote the 8th Doctor, my head exploded, I think, over this. Wait, you wrote the 8th Doctor, you're being invited to conventions.
It was scary.
Yeah. And so it was like, we have to do this, because I mean, I love Matthew. He's hilarious. And I know he's a funny person, and to follow him on this journey would have many gems in it.
The things your mates get you into, Sarah?
Well, that's it. Yeah, it just sounds like a buddy movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So had you seen the film before then? So when Matt said, "Oh, I did this thing with the 8th Doctor," you'd sort of worked out which one that would be.
I figured it out. I didn't know. I had never heard of the TV movie before. I think the first time I watched it, it had to be like on a YouTube or something, because I just couldn't get a hold of the DVD, or maybe Matt, you gave it to me. I can't remember, but I thought it was fantastic. I was like, why was this such a big deal? I thought it was Paul.
Why was it such a hoo-ha, Vanessa? A hoo-ha.
It was a hoo-ha. Yeah.
A hoo-ha.
That's quality.
There was a
hoo-ha. I was laughing.
Hullabaloo.
I thought it was great. Yeah. I thought it was a lot of fun. So I started off loving the TV movie.
What's not to love, Vanessa? We love it here too.
Oh, good.
But seriously though, there is so much Doctor Who, isn't there? And it's hard for people to know who came after who and what fits after what. And then there's this whole world, this whole universe around it, and colourful characters on screen and off screen, Matt. But it does seem to attract the kind of creative and eccentric people. But again, it's as regards to the characters on screen, it's also stories too. So you honed in on the fact that when you assembled this footage, that there was actually a story to tell, perhaps Matt's own story, that you could work on together and turn it into a feature-length documentary.
Well, yes. Initially, I mean, Matthew's reluctance was very real. He didn't want to go back into this world. And there was a big focus on just, a genuine interest in the fans and who are the American fans. And it took a little while to just also a bit of convincing, and mostly in the editing room, to be like, Matt, your story is here. We need to, this is the thing that's going to bring everyone's individual stories together. So it's a genuinely following him as he jumps into these waters. He thinks he's going to be jumping into like very, very aggressive waters with sharks and everything. But it's like, no, the Doctor Who community, they're wonderful, wonderful people.
So, yeah, it's interesting when we cut it together, because we realized really Doctor Who fans are it's a lovely sort of close-knit community, a family. And really the drama did lie in the fact that I was, I'm, if you like, I'm the villain of the piece. I'm the person who's basically saying, no, I'm not a fan. I want to be the one who's worshipped. I want to be the one who's adored. So you think, what a wanker. As I'm with all these lovely people, and I'm really not a nice person. And then it sort of slowly dawns that you realize that, by the end of the story, I basically become a fan, and I join that community, and it's really lovely. And it's not really about the show, it's about this community, and how they sort of help each other. And so that was a very touching thing to happen. And that's what's the main arc of the story. And obviously how that happens, you have to go and see the movie to see how that happens. And you have to see, you know, and certainly my dad, who played Doc Holliday, feeds into that.
It's something where we have people laughing, and by the end, they're crying or close to tears and not knowing why. I mean, Matthew goes to some very, very personal places. Fandom can be a very personal place of like, why do you attach yourself to Doctor Who? Or why do you attach yourself to Marvel Comics? It's fill that in with something else. And it's a very personal experience. And we meet some fans who really delve into that and how it helps them overcome grief or whatever else. And Matthew goes to a place that we were very surprised by. And that's kind of that sort of culmination of understanding like where that fan, how he is a fan.
And we talked to Paul McGann quite a bit. And Paul is very wise. He's like a sort of Yoda, sort of saying these pearls of wisdom.
This is why he was made such a great Doctor, because he's got those qualities.
He really does. You're right. Great. You're dead right. I mean, this is Sarah. I mean, he's very charismatic, and he's charismatic in the documentary as well. They worship him in America.
There's something sage-like about Paul. I think it's the mixture of the Liverpudlian, because you can still pick up those tones in his accent, but there's something else there too. I could listen to his voice forever, and if he's got something to say about this topic in this film, I can't wait to hear what you've brought out in Paul and all the other guests, because virtually everybody is in this film has sort of come to the party.
Philip Seal, Daphne Ashbrook. Daphne was wasn't she, Vanessa? She was our kind of she's the person who really triggered the thing, because when I was going to Gallifrey, the first thing I asked Sean Lyon, who's the showrunner at Gallifrey, was, can you put me in touch with Daphne Ashbrook? And I called her, and she was in New York at her daughter was about to audition for something, and she got on the phone, and she was just like super enthusiastic. She said, "Oh, I'm going to introduce you to all the American Uber fans. We'll you'll meet them all." And so she really guided us to a lot of these characters who we talk to. Yes, there she is, being Daphne. That's us backstage at a convention, and of course, what happens is as soon as they announced that, as they announced the guests going up on the stage, she would holler, whoa! Super enthusiastic.
I've never met Daphne, but I've met plenty of people who have, and they've told me about her, and she's quite a lively character. I've spoken to Paul very, very briefly, but I'd love to meet Daphne Ashbrook. She seems charming.
She's wonderful, a ball of energy, so much fun. So she's definitely.
Isn't it curious though? Isn't it curious, Vanessa, how that family feel that you spoke about seems to get passed down through the decades too, through different generations, not just of the fandom but of the cast as well. There's something about this that bonds people together. And you mentioned earlier on about, obviously this is Matt's personal story, and we talk about quite a lot, don't we, Sarah, how our connections to the show are very, very personal. There's a lot that's the same. Like, we all like cool spaceships and snappy dialogue and things like that, and cool haircuts and all. Everybody loves all that stuff. But I think the fundamental thing that sort of jacks you into this universe, and particularly that central character, can be really quite personal. And sometimes, for a long time, I include myself in this. I think I assumed that my view of it and that my connection with it and with the Doctor was a universal one. Right. But it isn't. It's particular to me, and I think this is part of reaching adulthood too, where your powers of empathy, your range of empathy starts to grow, and you think, oh, that person. Initially, I think you can get quite cross with people who've got a different connection to yours. You think, no, that's wrong. But then after a while, you think, oh no, that's not wrong. That's really interesting. Tell me more. And I get the impression that's another thing that you're doing in the film as well.
Right.
Oh, yes, certainly. I mean, even when we started out and we're still figuring out what is our story, that was one of the questions that we would ask people. It's like, how are you the Doctor? Was one of our questions, right, Matt?
Yeah. Who is the Doctor in you?
Yes, there you go. Who's the Doctor and you? And we got a different answer from everyone, because everyone sort of attaches different qualities of what it is to be the Doctor. And one person in the film, Malachi Keller, who works in films, he builds sets and stuff. His was, at the end of the day, he wanted to be the person who can, laugh and you get people together. He listed all these qualities of the Doctor that he loved. And at the end of the day, he's like, I just want to be accepted, like how he can accept people. I just want to be accepted. And it's like, oh, wow. And then everybody had all these beautiful kind of answers. And none of them were the same. None of them were the same.
I had wondered about that, Matt, because that title, Doctor Who Am I, obviously chimes with a certain line of dialogue in your script, but also it makes it seem like it could be autobiographical, but it sounds like it's something that is a lot more universal than that, a lot more relatable.
Yeah. It was the pitch, basically, that got me the TV movie. They'd been trying lots of different writers and they'd been trying lots of different approaches. But when I was approached by Trevor Walton at Fox and the people at Universal and Philip, I was overjoyed. I thought, this is great. But then the angle that is pretty conventional for a regeneration is the Doctor has to find his feet. And so it made sense that if the seventh Doctor, got killed and then they botched the surgery, and the regeneration process was messed with, it's made sense that the Doctor would have amnesia, and that's perfect for introducing a character, because you have to rebuild the identity. And so Doctor Who Am I was very much the shape of the show, i.e. he has to remember who he is in order to save the universe, or to save the world, and to save humans that he loves so much, because he is half human. And it was very much a sort of a case of reinventing the Doctor a little bit for America. And of course, Americans don't quite know how to. It was, and British fans, just you saying, they're completely in love with the Doctor. So no matter what I did, I was going to face criticism, and I think that happens now as well. But certainly, certainly it's happening to Chibnall and people. It's like it's tough. It's tough. We should all be so lucky, but it's tough to run a show, or to sort of put together a show that has as much history as the Doctor has.
And you're a part of it, Matt. You're there, dead center in the 90s at a very exciting time for the show. I was there. I didn't quite queue up. I won't lie to you. I didn't queue up at midnight to buy the VHS. I've got work the next day. But
you had a life.
But I was there at lunchtime. I was right there picking up the tape. I've got this. I've got your book here, the script book there. Yeah. This has been in my collection for.
I love the BBC. The script of the film.
It is. Your name on the spine there, mate. Your name on the spine.
Name on the spine. It's awesome, but it's like they couldn't publish it as a screenplay because of rights things, so they had to call it the script of the film. I don't think any script's been published like that before, but it is good.
They like to make sure, Vanessa, that people know exactly what they're buying, so they don't write to them afterwards and say, I thought this was the novel, I thought this was this, I thought this was that. But there's a great introduction in this by Philip Segal, funnily enough, and I've got it here. I've got it here for you. And he says sort of similar things to the things that you said. And Philip says, we faced the difficult task of finding the right writer to realise a script that would fit the needs of the two networks, the Fox and BBC networks, obviously. Our search ended with Matthew Jacobs, whose close association with the Doctor was unknown to me until we met in my office the first time. He says, Matthew's script needed to tell a story that was personal to the Doctor, dealing with his regeneration, putting him back on Earth. Important because, after all, these rules would ultimately help us define the Doctor's world to the uninitiated in a much more understandable way. We arrived at a story that everyone signed off, and Matthew went away to write it. So how long did it take you to write the screenplay, Matt?
It really didn't take that long. So I think it must have taken me about 6 weeks, or maybe 8 weeks to write the first draft because there was a lot of back and forth thing on the storyline. And in his book Regenerations, Philip and Gary did a very good sort of making of book called Regenerations. They actually published all the different outlines that I did. I did those quite quickly in a week or two, and they very quickly, you know, sort of put the thumbs up. And then if I remember rightly, it was like 6 weeks of writing, which was just, I really enjoyed writing it, because of course the Doctor hadn't been around, and I had all this history with my dad, and so
Oh no.
cut that out.
Oh,
I'm on my phone. So can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. You had all this history with your dad, you said.
Yeah. So anyway, I delivered it quite quickly, and then it was very quick, in as much as I think the BBC at that point read it and they went, "Car chasers." Oh my God, a motorcycle chase. Oh, good grief.
I thought it was great.
No.
It was
Oh no. And at that point, but we want to do it. But really, and so at that point, because it looked like it was going to happen, and my deal was if it happened, I became a co-producer. Suddenly I was given wings and I flew over to London to sit down with the executives there. And they were sitting there going, "Oh no, this dialogue, we don't like it. You know, it's all too florid." Because this is the mid-90s where everybody spoke like, yes, no, no, yes.
Or quite flipped, wasn't it? Very X-Files.
Very abrupt. And there were scenes with people going, scenes were lit by a cigarette lighter or something like that. And the style I wanted was more like a 1940s movie with, you know, ripping fast dialogue that Paul could deliver. You know, Paul could deliver a speech that is absolute gobbledygook, and you believe it. So we were all on slightly different pages. So then what started was this back and forth on the script, which carried on for another couple of months, but very quickly it got greenlit, mainly because of the energy of Philip Siegel. And certainly, you know, my enthusiasm was boundless, and Trevor Walton, who's the sort of unsung hero here, because Universal didn't really know what they had, but Trevor, who's British and who we've met, haven't we, Vanessa?
Yeah.
He's just this.
Catch up with him.
Yeah, he's just this incredibly charming guy, and I was in the National Youth Theatre with him. And so we were just like good friends. So it felt like a whole bunch of Brits there, trying to do their best to bring the Doctor back. And I think a lot of it has survived in its own way.
I'd say so. And this was,
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
You've been writing, you'd been working in entertainment for quite a long time, hadn't you? At that point, the film Paper House, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles 2, you worked on that, didn't you?
Yeah.
So this wasn't your first gig.
Oh, no. I was fairly well established. At that time, I was writing what became The Emperor's New Groove, and a whole bunch of, you know, and Lassie had just come out on Paramount. You know, it was at that time I was churning out franchise stuff, and then after 2008. I switched gear totally. You know, I mean, I did do one other big animation thing in 2014, but I switched gear into making films, into not waiting for permission to make films, basically. And it was around that time, 2009, when I met Vanessa, and you know, and both Bernard Rose and I just make films. We'll green light them even if we have no money. We'll just go out and start shooting, because that's the thing. You can do it. You can do that now. The
having the motivation, having the faith in one another, having a sounding board that you can trust. Clearly, you Vanessa and Matt, you clearly trust one another implicit with these projects. It's finding that kind of relationship where you know you can sort of just see if we can. We'll see what happens.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Guillermo del Toro calls it his film family. If you find your film family, find your people who you love to work with. It's just a tremendous thing, and it makes life really, really enjoyable. Also hair raising, because if you do something that's not commercial, then you will have worked for years and you probably see no money. But you have to find it's a blessing and a curse that the technology is democratized to such a massive extent these days, because it means that anybody can go out and make a film with their girlfriend or their friends, and that's the result. We've got like 5,000 movies floating around at any one moment, and only a few of them actually get filtered through and people can go see them.
I've recently interviewed a man who spent 10 years making a film that's now up on Amazon. And, it's out, it's finished, it's released. But he was telling me about the whole the 10-year process behind making this kind of a romantic comedy, a selection of romantic comedies that are all interconnected. And he filmed the material with a range of actors, including Louise Jameson from Doctor Who. He filmed it over that entire 10-year period. And he was forever putting it on the back burner, and then a little bit more, than gradually moving it to the point where people could see it. And so I've heard similar takes on that before. But I was looking at the promotional material for Doctor Who Am I, Matt, and I was drawn to this bit of publicity bump. And I did wonder, how much truth is there in this? Is this genuinely how you felt? Because it says an infamous Doctor Who screenwriter is reluctantly dragged back into the American Whoniverse in this funny and moving documentary about finding family in the unlikeliest of places. Infamous. Is he infamous, Vanessa? Is that...
Well, yes, to some people he is. It's also eye-catching. It took us forever to write that log.
It's very arresting.
Forever. Yes, some people you'll meet, some of the fans in the documentary who are, confrontational and voice their strong opinions.
They do,
which is not to say that everyone thinks that way, but for the sake of, it's true, infamous to some people.
I was wondering if it was an exaggeration for comic effect. I think, because obviously...
there's that too.
That's what I do.
You want to know that infamous.
Well, because I have to say, once I read that, I was kind of scratching my head a little bit, and I was talking to Dan. I really didn't think that you were infamous. It was news to me that you were so unpopular. I'm like, have we watched the same film? I was quite young in 1996. I was only 12, and I can remember being sat and watching it, on the BBC, and that was the first time that I'd been introduced to Doctor Who, because I'd missed that, the 80s. Right. I wasn't quite old enough, so you were my first introduction to Doctor Who, and you made it more accessible. And then obviously it disappeared. So I thought, oh, this is brilliant, And then I found out later, for me to know the fans, like, wow, didn't realise, there was this kind of like backlash in certain areas.
It was a bit of a backlash, and people. But I think the same has applied to most of the Doctor Who writers at one point or another in their journey. And there's a fan who just openly says, there are, with all due respect, Matthew, there are people who hate Russell T.
RTD, hate Moffat, with all due respect, your work.
And then that's his starting thing, and so it's the one thing people feel they can do, because they adopt the show. They feel like they could do this job, they could write it, they really do, and I think that's great. But sometimes it means that no matter what you do, in terms of making a show, there are going to be critics out there, and I've got a thicker skin about it these days, But I think at that time, I was so excited for it, and then when the press of the day, when the sort of the British newspapers at that time, they didn't receive it well, and then slowly as online built, it would get frowned upon. And we found all this stuff, where people were saying it's the worst film ever. So in a way, that's about why I didn't really want to go back into that world. I mean, why go somewhere where you basically feel you're not welcome? you wouldn't want to do that. But we found masses of people like yourself who actually really, that it's not important to them what exactly what it was written like. It was the fact that they just loved the Doctor. They liked Paul McGann. Do you know what I mean? And so that was the overriding thing. So basically, I needed to get real.
Well, I think your voice does ring. I don't know how many rewrites you did on the script, but there is a definite panache around the whole thing, and the dialogue is so punchy. It has a real spirit of adventure about it, and I think that there's a temptation, particularly when something's been away for so long, Vanessa, when it's a big IP like that now, as we call them IPs, there's a temptation that when it does sort of blaze back, for people to want everything all at once. Yeah. And people don't accept, Sarah. They forget more so that this was meant to be the beginning of something. And so why start with absolutely every dial cranked up to 11? Then you've got nowhere to go. So I do really rate this as a piece of entertainment, a great 90 minutes-ish in front of the telly, in front of the screen of any size. And yeah, and a really important piece of Doctor Who history. I can only imagine how it must feel when you see, for example, there are screenings. People have screenings now on projectors, don't they? This is
Paul Booth. We know Paul Booth. We interviewed him.
That's right, Paul.
Awesome.
He lectures in Doctor Who. He's a Doctor Who scholar. It's part, and he teaches at a university. Is it St. Paul University, Chicago? And
DePaul, yeah.
DePaul, yeah. And he's written a book on it, a very good book. And he really is. He teaches about popular entertainment basically, but the TV movie is one of his favorites, and every year, when new students join his class, they do a screening of the TV movie.
Wonderful. But when you see things like that,
I'm going to go.
She's off. She's gone. She's on the plane.
You go and get your masters in Doctor Who.
Yeah, he should do a live stream. That would be interesting.
Paul, come and speak to us, mate. Yes. So for every screen, there is like this, where people may put up a sheet in their back garden and get their friends around or whatever else. So there's that going on, which is lovely. But you've also got things like the BFI did the big screening for the 50th anniversary, and there was Paul and Daphne were there, and Jeff Sachs was there. So to see both reactions, Matt, all this time on, that must be vindication too. Or is it slightly distancing, slightly an out-of-body experience?
Well, yes, yes, absolutely. But as you'll see, what it does more than anything is when they then want to put me on a panel about the Gunfighters, which is the 1966 TV show that my dad played Doc Holliday in, and yes. I'm suddenly thrown right back to when I was like 10 years old, and he took me with him on my 10th birthday as a birthday treat to watch them filming the show, and it was my first. It was my first introduction, and an introduction to what he was about, and then that brings up all sorts of stuff and how one changes in one's life, and slowly I sort of start to realize, I am a fan, and that kind of, you get that feeling. I think it's kind of a great feeling when you realize that a piece of entertainment or what is it? I think it was Noel Coward or somebody said, the potency of a beautiful song, how sometimes a popular song can take you right back somewhere and remind you of all those feelings, and those feelings can be both sad, but quite often they can be cathartic, and funny and happy, and so you want to revisit them. It's like that TV show. Well, and that's really what Doctor Who is very much about. People have their Doctor, and they go and they visit it, and like you're saying, they put it up on a sheet in the backyard, and they just really treasure these stories. And I think the same applies for Star Trek. I think it applies for Elvis. I think it applies Star Wars, definitely Star Wars. Yeah. You know, and Indiana Jones, you know, so it's so for me, it was, yes, there was a definite frisson and a definite kind of feeling of validation that this journey has given me personally. But also, I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot from working, from co-directing, or co-directing, you know, with Vanessa. For me, has been a major move forward. You know, as a director, one normally I work very instinctively, and as a writer, I work very instinctively. I let my instincts guide me, and I rely on that process to move you forward. But when you're co-directing or you're co-writing, and I've done quite a bit of co-writing, I had to bring all the skills of co-writing to co-directing, where you have to respect the other creator's instincts, and so that's been the fascinating process. And that's a very big thing for me that I've taken away from this project.
And I suppose between you had to manage your own time, Vanessa, and resources, and perhaps in some instances was Matt too close to this, and it was important that you were a sounding board for some of that. How was that balance?
I mean, at some point, well, Matt's in it, so yes, there was that, but also at times when you're an editor, you're so close in it, you also need another perspective. So it was, like Matt said before, we are American Anorak. There is no other team. We've brought some people in. We brought in like Mark Leggett, who did an amazing score. Dave Eichhorn did amazing work with the sound. Dylan Glockler, who was the camera or DP. So, I mean, we brought in people, but it was just us. And
Colin Vaines.
Yes, Colin Vaines, of course. He's like, you know.
Who's Colin Vaines? Tell us who's
He's our executive producer, and he took us under his wing, and it has helped us, you know, tremendously as a sounding board, even some edit cuts and stuff like that. But he is really great. But I mean, at the end of this whole process, Matthew and I are still friends. Well, that's like the biggest accomplishment. Great.
I should hope so.
Oh God! Well, I think that to talk about this and to not show people is probably a little cruel after we've whetted their appetite. So how about we take a look at the trailer to Doctor Who Am I? What do you think, everybody? What do you think?
Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go for it. Here we are.
I feel like I don't want to regard myself as a fan. I'd rather be the one who's worshipped.
Worshipped or blamed?
I think at the end of the day, probably both.
I wrote The Eighth Doctor, played by Paul McGann.
It's a bit of a responsibility, I think, that we have. You know, stories are powerful. Mythologies are powerful.
My job was to write a TV movie pilot with the hope that it would spawn a new American Doctor Who series.
The American fans, they are the diehards.
There's a whole community of people that do this.
They love this thing that society says you shouldn't love as much as you do.
I didn't go to conventions for a very good reason.
Be nice.
I thought the fans would kill me.
The Doctor being half human. Please punch me in the face.
People universally went after the script.
I got physically assaulted by someone who was so angry at the idea that the Doctor would kiss.
No sex, please. He's Matthew Jacobs.
My father was an actor. He was in an early Doctor Who adventure called The Gunfighters.
It'd be fantastic on The Gunfighters, because you're going to go back to your boyhood memories.
I really don't want to do The Gunfighters panel. It's freaking me out. I was pouring myself into that character. I got so close. And then I got left behind. Maybe I'm regenerating.
Doctor Who has helped a lot of people find who they are.
This is a giant family, and it's full of love.
The sense of community and companionship.
That's what I enjoy the most about it.
You go for the fans.
You're a part of this now.
I think at the end of the day, I'm a bigger fan than I knew. At some point or other in our lives, we all ask the same question. Who am I?
Oh, I got a little bit of a shiver then when he said that, Sarah. I don't mind telling you. And I do like...
Oh, God, that was so moving. I could feel myself welling up for the family and the fan. God, this is the best fandom. No offense to Star Wars or Star Trek, but
it's delightful. And that trailer really, I think it really frames it nicely, Vanessa. I mean, particularly that bit where you're going up the stairs and you say to Matt, be nice.
Get a bit of that.
I'd say, no wonder people didn't like you in the playground. You know what I mean? I said, and I remember we were driving to that interview. Yeah.
Obviously, we wouldn't dare trying to spoil this film, particularly when you've been working on it for so long. Just trying to whet everybody's appetites. Really, It seems very much a character piece with you at the dead center of it there, Matt. You know, you're clearly he's got his head in his hands. But it does seem you are laid pretty much bare. And we get a hint there, I think, of the story and the journey that you're going to travel. But it does seem to be that you either jump into these things wholeheartedly or is it Vanessa shoving you? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's a bit of both. But I love what I'm seeing and hearing so far. It does look like you're game for pretty much anything.
Yeah. That was a lovely guy, Stefan Rees, and his wife Heather, and their little baby. They had a little baby Piper, and we went to visit them. That was the place where Vanessa was saying, "Be nice."
Yes.
And I could not be nice. I got up there, and the whole of their place was basically all Doctor Who, and they had this newborn baby who's dressed as a TARDIS. She'd just been to Comic-Con. It was beautiful, and we've gotten to know these families. They've been through hard times since, and God bless Heather. She passed away a couple of years ago, and they're all. They're coming. We've got the film is premiering at Newport Beach Film Festival end of next week, which is exciting. And I'm hoping Stefan and I'm hoping a lot of the fans actually come along because they're very much part of this story. It's really great.
Also in Portland. We have 2 screenings in the U.S. The Newport Beach Film Festival, which is on Friday. And then Sunday, we're going to be up in Portland for the Portland Film Festival. They're screening it there too. So if you guys know anyone in Portland or in Orange County,
lots of our companions out there, all over the world. So I'm sure that somebody will certainly sort of pick that up and go along because they turn out wherever Doctor Who is talked about and screened. It does bring us out of the woodwork. And I did notice because I've been following this project for quite a long time, Vanessa. I was aware that you were making something. I wasn't sure when we were going to get to see it or how. And I've seen various different versions of posters over the years. You think, wasn't Matthew Jacobs working on a document? And then it turns up again. Then you become aware that, yes, this is going to happen. We are going to see this. And so to finally see these screenings listed and the posters appear. And I notice as well those little sort of emblems you get on the bottom of the posters that say, it's been recognised by this film festival and that film festival. That's a nice sight. I mean, I would have gone to see it anyway. I would have been totally down for this anyway. But the fact that this is reaching the people who you would expect, such as myself, is one thing, but that greater recognition does point at something that is connecting with people on maybe levels that you may have hoped but couldn't have anticipated when you're putting it together.
I think we just hoped. The whole film festival process can be disheartening, to say the least. So there was a period of I just stopped applying to festivals because we were just getting rejections. My hometown people or whatever. It was just like, this isn't going to happen. But then in the same week, Louis Savvy from London Syfy, we got an acceptance letter. We were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I think Melbourne came later that week, and it was just this dose of validation because we've been on this journey for so long. We're like, nobody's going to see it. But then we got into 2 festivals, and really it was London Syfy and Louis Savvy who watched it, who said, he's like, I'm not a Doctor Who fan, but I love this documentary, and just gave us the time. And sort of that was our platform to really then, we had a coverage in The Guardian, and that's how we got Kaleidoscope behind us.
Yeah.
They've
been great.
They've been great.
They're distributing the film.
Yes. Yeah. In the UK, and they're a world sales agent. Yes.
So how does it feel, Vanessa? Now you're so close to the general public being able to see this, to go to the screenings and to pre-order the DVD, the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray is quite a recent thing, wasn't it? That wasn't originally listed, but I don't know whether it's demand. Is it due to popular demand? People have been asking, what, can we have this on Blu-ray? And suddenly a Blu-ray appears.
You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we know the mechanics of it. Kaleidoscope work in, like God, they work in mysterious ways. So, and as a filmmaker, you soon learn, oh, that's happening. That's interesting. But they have a tremendous wisdom, because they're a relatively small company, but they make these great documentaries and slightly fringier fiction films, and they have, you know, and they own the Icon catalog, and Spencer Pollard, who's came in behind it. He just watched it because somebody had seen it at Sci-Fi London, and he realized, yes, there's definitely a market for this, because it goes beyond just being about the show. There's a story there, that's sort of a separate thing. If we'd made it at the BBC, it would be about the show, and it would just be a making of kind of documentary. So he saw beyond that, and he's put it out on Blu-ray, I think, because that's where they make the most money, obviously. And it's a very reasonable price. And so we're very pleased, because I think that's the thing about Doctor Who fans is, yeah, there you go. My gosh. They really appreciate actually holding on to physical media, and so the Blu-ray will be fun. I'm hoping they ask us to do we're just completing all the assets for it at the moment. I'm hoping they ask us to do a commentary or something like that, to give it more fun. Yeah.
The way I look at it, Vanessa, if I can't dust it, then I haven't had it. I don't own it.
Yeah.
Even as an experience.
Like my collectibles on the shelves.
If I can't dust it, I love
that's
that.
Funny.
Fantastic, Dan.
Yeah, so obviously I am really excited about this. You know, Sarah and I, we were talking a little bit about the fan experience. In fact, that's what we talk about a lot, isn't it, Sarah, on this show, the various things that we get up to. And as fans, you know, we get together, we go to conventions, we go to signings, we go to what they used to call sort of comic book marts, and pick through other people's junk and all that kind of thing. But we do it all together, and we get on these shows and on Zoom calls about the things that we love. And that is the world within a world that I feel this film looks to me to be a really accurate representation of that.
Thank you.
Okay, I've seen, and that's sort of been attempted before, but I think there's never been anybody who's been so game, Matt, to be so exposed and to lead it and to be out there putting his name to it, just totally head first. It's the spirit in which the trailer is pitching the story. It's irresistible almost, and I think this is going to do really well. The right film at the right time.
Thanks. Thank you so much. I mean, I think the aim, isn't it, Vanessa? The aim is like there aren't enough feel-good movies around, and when I get very inspired when I see a feel-good movie, especially if it's one that people can identify with, which I think this documentary is one. You know, it's not about a dying fish or running a hospital or anything really worthy and serious like that. It's about what it's like to enjoy TV shows, stuff that we all do, you know.
I think it's more than that. I think it transcends that, because it is just, at the end of the day, a story of humans all getting together in this, like,
that's right,
subcult. I mean, fandom, you know, the conventions, it has become its own thing over time. And did you know, at the end of the day, it's your journey, it's Vanessa's journey. It's just a human interest story, and you know, they're the most accessible ones, they're the most relatable ones. And you're right, everybody loves a feel-good human story. So I think that's why it won't just be for the fans, it'll be for anybody who's interested in them kind of stories.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. I mean, that was kind of our hope, is that this is for the fans. Obviously, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, you'll latch onto it. You know who Matthew is, or you'll learn who Matthew is. But the human story is there that anyone can track it. So someone who knows nothing about Doctor Who, we kind of give the background up front, so they know enough to like still follow the story. So, you know, my cousin who knows nothing about Doctor Who, she watched it, and, you know, critic, I was like kind of scared, but she loved it, and she's like, Matthew, I need to meet Matthew. I want to give Matthew a hug by the end of it. So Matthew still has to get a hug from my cousin Shirley.
So
who just loved it. So
apart from soliciting hugs from everybody out there, what are your hopes for the film, Matt? What sort of impact do you want it to have to bring people together, or maybe to stimulate other people to tell their stories? Where do you see this going?
That's a really good question. It's like we're so involved in the business of getting it out there that I haven't really thought long term.
Yeah. Sounds like it's been intense.
Yeah, so it's been intense the past few weeks. I think we're both sort of, you know, it's like when they put the film through QC, you know, oh, there's a pixel there that's out of place, and you know, and oh my gosh, this and that. And
there's a lip smack. What? Wait, I can't even hear that.
So you don't get to think about what the overriding effect. I think really, I hope it becomes, you know, part of a trend, in a way that people are able to. At one point at the Melbourne Film Festival, they reached out to us. They said, "Listen, we really loved the movie. We wanted to give it a prize, but there isn't really a category that covers this kind of movie." Now, these kind of movies are actually being made quite a bit. So there'll be a wonderful film about Dan Day-Lewis. There's that great film about Val Kilmer, things like that. But our movie is not really about. I mean, I'm not a star, and I have no ambitions to really be a star. But this film is a sort of
in that trailer. You said you wanted to be adored, mate.
Yeah,
I
need to call that out. Yeah, you want to be a star.
Being adored and being a star.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just that.
Yeah, of course.
And of course. But you're right. I feel like there's a whole little genre of these movies, and I'm hoping that we lead the pack in some way, of sort of honest to goodness kind of roots movies that are about media and how it works, because it's such a massively important part of our culture, how television works, how films work, and those things, that the more understanding people have of the culture that they participate in, the less likely it is that they're going to be swayed by propaganda, which is of course one of the big fears that people face. So having a real understanding of how mass media works is something that I hope will benefit everyone, and actually is, that's the most serious part of the film, is sort of and analyzing that. So for my hopes for the future is that maybe we've started a ball rolling here, of people making analytical films about the way in which their culture works. God, that sounded heavy.
I know. I was like, wow, that's really deep, Matt.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess yes. So the first thing is, I guess it's true.
Have a good time.
Just trying to get this documentary delivered and out there, and it's been few months now, I feel like since June, July, where it's just been nonstop. So just getting the movie out would be great. This is the week, I think. But other than that, I think for me, it's just the spirit of independent filmmaking, because this is an independent movie. It's not like the movies that say, oh, we're independent, but they have hundreds of thousands of dollars, or, you know, producers and this and that, or, you know, anything at Sundance already has like, you know, millions of dollars or something. But I don't know. I believe that's true, but it was just us. So it's just shining a light on indie film, truly indie film, and the journey that we've had just to this 7+ years just to get it out there. I mean, it was really hard.
She says really it gritted 7 years of my life, Matthew Jacobs. So would you, now obviously you're not at the finishing line. It's close. It's close.
Like, we just need an email. We just need an email at this point.
It's that close. It's that close, is it? Well, I was thinking, you know, because obviously you've got this relationship between you, clearly have worked well together closely on this over a long period of time. Could there be further documentaries, not necessarily about Doctor Who, but could you be working together again on something else? You must have other projects that you're thinking about, or you're going to take a long break from one another for
well, who knows? Who knows? I think right now it's like the goal is to finish and move on to something else for sure.
We're probably, you know, there's no reason why we couldn't come back together and make something else in the future. But I think we're both following our own paths. I've got stuff in development. Vanessa has stuff in development, and you know, and hopefully this will help, you know, get those projects to a place where people are, you know, want to invest in them before they're finished, you know, which would be nice. And so you know, Vanessa's a brilliant documentarian, and so I think that I think, you know, that's just around the corner, and also a good, you know, a good filmmaker generally. So and I'm working away on a TV show at the moment, but that we'll announce that later.
It seems clear to me that there's a lot of deep respect between the two of you and fondness and the immense creativity that has resulted in this film. I can't wait to see it. As you said, well, it's genuinely.
It is genuinely, and I've just found out that it is showing at my local cinema, so I'm really excited. I will be seeing it on the screen.
Oh,
fantastic!
Amazing.
In Sheffield.
In Sheffield, yeah. I was really thinking it was just going to be like the big cities, like London, but no, it's in my little corner.
Is it at the View there, or is it
at the View? Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Now, obviously, Doctor Who, the movie, the original TV movie from 1996, that's still available on DVD and Blu-ray. It's up on iPlayer, I believe, and it's streaming here, there, and everywhere. That's fairly easy to get your eyes on if you haven't seen it. I can't believe anybody out there hasn't seen it, but it is freely available on the format of your choice. But Doctor Who Am I from Kaleidoscope Entertainment, directed by Vanessa Yuille, and Matt Jacobs here, is screening in those selected UK cinemas from Thursday, the 27th of October, Sarah, and will be available on Blu-ray, DVD, and as a digital download from the 28th of November. And the little blurb says it features the original cast of the controversial movie, made by the undesirable Matt Jacobs there. Of the controversial movie, including Paul McGann, Eric Roberts, Daphne Ashbrook. Says this funny and emotionally perilous documentary not only revisits a pivotal moment in Doctor Who history, but highlights the unity and creative freedom within the fandom, as Matt Jacobs ultimately and unexpectedly finds himself part of a close-knit yet vast family of fans. It's going to be, this is absolutely irresistible. But as we've spoken about, the 60th anniversary is close at hand, Matt, and we're all hoping, I think, fingers crossed, fingers and toes crossed, come to think of it, we're all hoping that we may see Paul back on screen again as the Doctor for however long, ideally a bit longer than 6 minutes this time. But I wanted to ask you, have you any desire as a writer, as a director, even as an actor, to reconnect with Doctor Who in any of those ways? Is there another story under the surface somewhere? Would you ever be involved, want to be involved in something?
Well, of course I would, I mean, but the show has moved on, and there are people working on it now who who are far more in touch with what the show is right now. I mean, I think, of course, I would love to sort of to revisit the Eighth Doctor or be involved in any which way, because it really is a fabulous show. But nobody's knocking on my door. And I think after this documentary they definitely won't be. You sometimes I like doing stuff that these days I tend to do stuff that I originate rather than picking up existing IPs. It's just the way it goes when but maybe that'll all change. Never say never.
Never say never. Never say never. And I hope Paul comes back. That'd be so cool.
I asked him directly at BritCon, which is a Seattle convention that was a couple of months ago, and it was this moment, and I said, "So are you going to be, involved in the 60th?" And it was like I'd asked, about his underwear or something. I mean, it was like it's like a question that nobody should ask. But he I think his expression was, and you might want to double check this before you put it in the podcast. I think his thing was they'd be wise to include me. Words to that
Good
effect.
man.
Yeah,
so
of
course.
Very diplomatic. So I'm hoping that they will include him to some degree in this. I'm hoping they'll include him more than they did in the 50th. In some way, if not in the show, but certainly in terms of all the ancillary stuff that's going on, connected with the Doctor next year.
It seems like there's more popularity around him. Would you say that's true? I mean, I feel like a lot more people are excited about him. And I feels like it's much more of a possibility that he'll be appearing.
Yeah, like this morning. This morning, Radio Times announced that they're making this an 8th Doctor month. There's just a series of articles about Paul McGann, and because there's a great journalist, Sab Astley, and he just wanted to cover the documentary, and he's interviewed Paul, Eric, Phil Siegel, myself, Vanessa, and some other people as well. He's and so the Radio Times are running an exclusive thing on the TV movie and the documentary all this month. There'll be a series of articles.
I think with Paul, I don't know if you agree with me, Sarah, but I think he seems to get more and more popular with every passing year, doesn't he? Not just his take on the Doctor, but him as a man as well. The more we hear him speak, the more
he gets more handsome every year as well. So,
that's really irritating as well, isn't it, Paul?
Isn't it? What's going on there?
Because we know you're listening, Paul.
He's got a portrait somewhere.
Turn it down.
I just think he's such a rarity because not every diehard Doctor Who fan is into Big Finish, so that's its own subculture.
Yeah, that's where he lived the longest.
He's only had those 2 screen appearances, so yeah, we're absolutely desperate to have him back on our screens. And there's definitely more that can be uncovered. I mean, I love the Big Finish stuff he does, but to see him back on screen just for any time, yeah, it's about time.
Bounding back onto screen, this is what we demand, and are brimming with energy in the same way that you are, Matt.
Maybe that's the thing that our documentary will do. It sort of
bring Paul back.
Bring Paul back. Maybe that's what the upshot. Forget about a greater understanding of culture. Maybe what the thing will do is we'll end up with more of the 8th Doctor.
Well, whatever your own personal wishes for the film are, and that of Kaleidoscope, we hope that it does reach all the potential that you could ever want for the film, particularly after such a long period of development. Matthew Jacobs, Vanessa, your very best of luck with Doctor Who Am I? And thank you so much for joining us for this edition.
Thank you.
Dan, Sarah, thank you so much. It's been great.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalized you there, or should I say that Kevin has. Thanks, Kevin. But we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. If you head over to teepublic.com, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and there you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of the shows, on everything from T-shirts to phone cases and enormous tapestries. I know. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself, treat your other selves. And it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain. So everybody wins. Yes, the beryllium clock has stopped, but we're still here, Sarah. I'll tell you what, we get used, don't we, as people who watch a lot of telly and movies and all that kind of thing. We get used to seeing names on credits, don't we, and to seeing names on the spines of books and whatever other collectibles and things that we may have. But it's lovely to not just put faces to the names, but in the case of our talk with Matt and Vanessa, we can put the personalities to the names too.
Yeah, and it makes such a difference. You know, we've already discussed how, you know, Doctor Who's personal to all of us, but you know, and everyone who's involved in Doctor Who in some way, it is just part of being a fan. There's a reason why we show such loyalty to, you know, other actors, like, you know, watching Matt Smith in The Crown and House of the Dragon. We follow everything David Tennant's ever been in, you know, Jenna Coleman. You get those connections, and but to have it, you know, not just on screen but off the screen, the people that have put this together, and even, you know, people that maybe didn't consider themselves fans, you know, as we've just seen, became fans in this process, and that's always good. You've got that feeling of one of us, you will be like us. But yeah, it's just, I can't really describe it. I don't want to say that it means more to you than to me, because I don't think that's fair. But I think
it means different things to us all. I think.
But the fact that, you know, you suffered through those wilderness years, and to have that hope of, you know, you poor fans, you know, you did trudge there.
It was a trudge.
Even have the hope that it was going to come back in any kind of capacity, and for that brief year, after all the build up and all the rumours, for you to finally get that, you know, I can't imagine what it was like. For me, it's completely different, but no less powerful. And to find out, you know, how Matt felt like he was being perceived, you know, that he felt like there was this backlash, and he felt unable to attend these conventions, and had this real dread. It did really shock me to feel like you do feel unwelcome, and that to find out that he discovered he is part of this Doctor Who family, and the people do love him, they respect what he did and what he tried to do. And I'm just so glad that Vanessa found this story in it and wanted to share it with us. And I can't think of anything better than to have a show about fandom on the Fandom Podcast Network, because basically that's what we're about. It's like the perfect vehicle for it. And again, it just shows how genuinely tolerant and welcoming the true Doctor Who family is. And after all this negativity and this divisiveness over the past few years on social media, and in different groups, and then to just see like this one person, and it's kind of like the prodigal son, isn't it, in a way? The prodigal son of Doctor Who.
Very much so. Or maybe the prodigal father, because I think one of the things that I liked most about it was seeing a certain degree of fatherly pride on Matt's face when he talked about the Eighth Doctor.
Yeah, there definitely was. And, for all the criticisms levelled at him, he had a vision that I felt was right, and it was greenlit. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have had Paul McGann as the Doctor. We wouldn't have had an Eighth Doctor. And who knows where it had gone. We know it might have not gone any further than 8. And Paul McGann kind of owes his career as the Eighth Doctor to Matt and his team and everybody who was involved in bringing this project, because they sowed the seeds. And when we spoke about it being like an acorn, everything about the Eighth Doctor and his success and big finish, and why he is, for some people, he is their favourite Doctor, even despite this short screen time. And you can attribute that. It all goes back to Matt's vision, and I think he should be very proud of that.
Matt's grasp on the character, and that he was able to communicate it in such a short period of screen time as well. As you say, we know several people who count the Eighth Doctor as their favourite, people who make content as well.
Just after 90 minutes, it is a big ask. And everything, even the questionable aspects of it, it was a turning point for Doctor Who, whether you agreed with it or not. That was the way. And I know that really resonated with Russell T Davies, for example. I mean, he could see the seeds of, well, this is what we need to do to make Doctor Who modern, to get modern. He was responding. I mean, the things with Grace, didn't bother me as such, because I'd not experienced classical at that point. So the things like the Rose love story, that wouldn't have come about if Matt had opened the door. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, it resonated with modern viewers. It was kept them coming back. Rose is considered one of the best companions of the new era, and you could see how much Russell T Davies and the other writers of that first series, that brilliant series 1, came from the idea and the directions that were in this. And I just think it's far from a flop. I think it has become kind of like a cornerstone of Doctor Who, in my opinion.
No, I would agree, and I think it's also it also stands as a 90-minute sort of lesson in how to be brave with an intellectual property, how to push things on, how to rattle cages without necessarily sort of bending bars out of shape. And okay, you can't please all of the people all of the time. I think it's probably foolish to even attempt to do that. But as regards setting out down a path which could have pleased a lot of people in the long term, it's a strong start. I'll never look at the TV movie in quite the same light again since I've spoken to Matt and seen a little of his personality and understood of the component part that it played in his career, in this whole creative journey. You can see he's a very, very creative man with this great zest for life, and clearly lots of ideas, lots of energy, and underneath it all as well, still a fan of the same silly old TV show that we are, and of that character, that magical character that he would have seen as a boy, and has got to shape in no small part in a way that's helped it achieve the longevity that it has now, like 26 years on. I can't wait to see the full film. I found the trailer genuinely moving.
Yes,
and yeah, having spent that time with Vanessa and Matt together, knowing that it's going to be a very personal journey. Yeah, I can't wait to find out more about them and more about myself too. I think from hearing Matt speak about it in particular, obviously because it goes so it's partly autobiographical, I suppose. You do wonder, what will it reveal to me about my fandom for this show that I've been watching since I was a little kid, and what could spring from this? You know, who out there, which filmmakers out there, which other fans could be tempted, inspired by this documentary to do similar, to tell similar stories. I think that's a great gift, very, very generous for a project that's going to be seen by so many people, to be so personal at the same time. And yeah, it's available. Obviously, it's going to be available on DVD and Blu-ray in due course. That's at the end of November, and I know you plan on making a screening. I found out there's some screenings near me, so I'll try and get along to some of them. But yeah, that is the old girl starting up and calling time on another edition of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast. I'll be back with another soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40 at type40.podbean.com, or maybe across any major podcatcher. We're pretty much on them all by now. New podcatchers, in fact, are being added all the time. As soon as we find another one, we try and jump on it. So if you go over to type40.podbean.com, you get every episode of Type 40 Doctor Who podcast, and you get audio editions of our live streamed magazine format show, Type 40 Live 2. So that's all coming up there on the feed. And of course, we're still on the Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed over there with all those other shows. I think there's on the daily now a great podcast from somewhere in the pop culture universe. We're here on YouTube, of course, on the Spacebook YouTube channel, the world's largest of the streaming platforms. But yeah, send us all your feedback. Of course, let us know in the comments section or over on our social media. You can send us your reviews from those screenings, can't they, Sarah?
Oh, yeah,
you're going to see Doctor Who Am I. Let us know what you think of it all. And if you've got some questions, maybe you could have some questions to put to Matt and Vanessa after the fact. We could reach out to American Anorak, and maybe we can get them back on the show.
Oh yeah, we'd love to get them back on. Yeah, once it's been released and we see how, what the reaction is. That'd be really cool. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know how much Matt's journey resonates with other fans. I think that's going to be the interesting thing out of this.
So reach out to us through our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type40Doctor Who. Or you can email us, type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really brave and fancy some real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat, well, you can head over to the Type 40 Facebook group. Over there on Facebook, just type Type 40 into the search field at the top, and you'll find us pretty damn quick. That's where you can find generations upon regenerations of Doctor Who fans there. They're talking about classic Doctor Who and new Doctor Who and speculating about what's to come in new Doctor Who. There's fans of all ages, and half humans are more than welcome, Sarah. Yes, you can swap your theories in the Type 40 Facebook group. Sarah, where can people connect with you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. Just type in Starry-Eyed Girl. I think I got that wrong done. My tag is I couldn't get Starry-Eyed Girl as the hashtag, so it's hashtag Starry-Eyed Who.
There we are. That's even better.
Come and have a chat.
I think that's even better, Sarah. I do. And yeah, you can connect with me on social media as the Spacebook, where I'm talking about all things geeky, inside and outside of the TARDIS, whatever catches my mind, my imagination, or both in movies, TV, comic books, and now and again I even talk about real life. I do have a real life. People find that difficult to believe.
It's hard to believe that we do.
It's all over there. So please, yeah, come and find me on social media there. Okay, that wraps us up for another show. Once again, thanks to you, Sarah, for being here. It's been a blast as always. Our thanks to Vanessa and Matt, and best of luck with the film. And as always,
thank you for having me. As always, it's been brilliant.
And as always, thanks to you for listening. Thanks for watching. We always have the time, if you have the space, here at Type 40. But that's it for this time. You take care. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.